law has been restricted. That in itself is equally constitutional. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as a whole, however much we would have desired to support and amend this bill so that if it means going for mediation and enhance the bicameral relationship, this bill is fundamentally wrong, fundamentally unconstitutional, and unfair to the provisions of the Constitution and the mandate of this House. And therefore, I do not support the passage of this bill. I do not support the provisions of this bill. And I ask that this bill be rejected and it be taken to mediation so that the proper mandate of this House, the provisions of Article 96 and the provisions of Article 94 and 93 are protected. Let the bill be drafted as it had previously been requested by the joint session of the members of this House and the National Assembly, led by the respective speakers, and where the Office of the Attorney General was involved, so that a whole inclusive bill be drafted that contained the text that protects the mandate of this House and the mandate that this House has been given by the representation that is in the House. Mr. Speaker, I therefore reject and ask the membership of this House to read the report so that they internalize and understand the need of making sure that the only way that we will protect this House is by making sure that whatever legislation that is passed or debated and passed in this House are those that protect the mandate of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Chair Jailak. Next is Senator Cherargei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I would have expected even Senator Sifuna to take note that I have worn an orange tie, and as the SGO of ODM, it should at least be fair today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know, we need in our standing orders, when the chair and the committee rejects a bill, what becomes of it? But let me give my Solomonic injection to this conversation, Mr. Speaker, by saying, Mr. Speaker, I know today in the afternoon you had a communication where we are going for mediation under Division of Revenue. Mr. Speaker, what we are even requesting for counties is modest. It is only 415 billion, Mr. Speaker, against 4.2 trillion budget. While at least we accept that there are challenges with running of counties, including of wastage of resources and corruption, that should not be a reason why we need to deny counties the money, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this bicameral has come a long way from 2010 to now. I know, Mr. Speaker, I didn't see the need of this bill because the Constitution and legal precedents, even on petition number 3 of the Senate Republic in 2013 on division of revenue was pronounced itself as Supreme Court, that Senate must be part of budget-making process because it is there in the Constitution. From the word go, I didn't see the need why we should have this legislative proposal, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this legislative proposal has been made in a manner likely to make Senate become a rubber stamp of the lower house, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, Senate in its rightful place should and must be respected, Mr. Speaker. We are not an appendage of the National Assembly or any other entity, Mr. Speaker. We are elected by the people. We are entrenched in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the law, when a bill comes to the floor of the House, Mr. Speaker, the life of a bill as it is in the Constitution 2010, if it originates in the 8th House, if it is passed in the 8th House with amendments, Mr. Speaker, it goes for mediation. I don't see the reason why we introduce, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in that note, I want to celebrate my successor, Senator Cherargei, that is now coming of age. Because if you remember my era, I used to shoot straight from the hip. And that is why by the 3rd year, as the Senate Jailak chairperson, I was de-whipped. Because if you look at my history, and the answered can bear witness, my prowess in running the JLAG in the last session, even Senator Manzo and yourself, even the JLAG at that time, and I know the chair of JLAG, Senator Cheptumo, was there, and we worked closely. I want to encourage him. Being a chair of JLAG is not easy sometimes, because even we went ahead and investigated enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killings, Mr. Speaker. So it is not, but I want to thank the Senate JLAG chairman and the committee for providing guidance. And this is leadership. This is now leadership, and we will take cue on the report of the committee and reject this bill in totality, in total. I don't know whether there is such a name in English. In total, we shall reject this bill, Mr. Speaker. Because I'm happy, at least with the secretariat that we have, Mr. Speaker. And allow me, Mr. Speaker, to celebrate, because these are our finest drafters and legislative drafters in this House. Dr. Johnson Okello, Director of Legal Services, Mr. Speaker, for being elected the President of the Multinational Association of Legislative Council, the first African jurist to sit. That body was formed 40 years ago, Mr. Speaker. But we have Dr. Johnson Okello, our Director of Legal Services, who holds PhD in law and has practiced law for our legal practice for over 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. I know where he comes from. Having education is not a problem. But we celebrate him, Mr. Speaker. For us who have interacted with Dr. Johnson Okello, Director of Legal Services of the Senate, he is a man of immense knowledge and wisdom and guidance at any given opportunity. So, Mr. Speaker, allow me to celebrate him, wish him well, as he serves for the next 2 years as the President of the Multinational Association of Legislative Council. Mr. Speaker, by merit, these are people who should be occupying the highest offices in the land if we are using meritocracy as a yardstick. But since we use other measurements, Mr. Speaker, like night running and other issues, then, Mr. Speaker, it's always a complicated story altogether, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to make 5 comments. And thank you also, Mr. Speaker, and your office for supporting our secretariat. We are saying, Mr. Speaker, our secretariat are the best. Dr. Johnson Okello has led, and I know a number of secretariat from our clerk, Mr. Nyekenye, and the deputies and the table office here, Mr. Speaker. We always celebrate and have tremendous respect, Mr. Speaker, to all our staff, from even the gatemen, from the people who serve us tea and food, all our staff, even the sergeant-at-arms are doing a tremendous. And I know these are some total, Mr. Speaker, of what you are doing in terms of leadership of the Senate and the Parliament of Kenya. But also, you should not also gag us when we have also reservations on some of the services in the House, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, when you look at clause number 7, and Mr. Speaker, how can you say, this is Article 118 on public participation. How can you say if one house has sold a public participation, the other house should not hold? It is a constitutional requirement that public participation by members of public must be done. Because that is what we get the second opinion, even on finance bill now, Mr. Speaker. Public participation is mandatory. Because you saw there were advisors that were being paid 1 billion. But the only advice they gave us was to add 10 shillings to a loaf of bread, Mr. Speaker, which is causing you and cry, Mr. Speaker. That is why we need to go back to the people so that they do public participation. It is in bad faith to say if National Assembly has all our public participation, we should not all our public participation. We have a symbiotic relationship. We are distinct, but we must do the job. If it is National Assembly, let Senate do public participation, let the National Assembly do public participation. I remember, Mr. Speaker, even on the sugar bill that is under mediation. When National Assembly did public participation, they didn't switch RAM areas. What we should be proposing is that if a National Assembly has public participation in Makueni, then now Senate can do it in Siaya, for example, or they do it in Nairobi, we do it in Nandi, we do it in Figa, Mr. Speaker, and I think or Bomet, or even Meru, so that we can complement each other, but it's not a competition, Mr. Speaker. So on this one, on the public participation, Mr. Speaker, this is the fall flat on its face and must fall by their own sword, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have seen in this bill, Mr. Speaker, on the joint sitting, Why would you call us join? You know the South Africa Parliament, Mr. Speaker, when they have a presidential address, SONA, South Africa National Address, they use joint sitting rules. Why are you calling us for a sitting rule, for a joint sitting, and let's say you use National Assembly, standing orders, and then you make you the Speaker to be like Deputy Speaker of a National Assembly Speaker? The Speaker, this bill has been drafted with an intention to demean and disparage and eradicate the standing of the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is why as a Senate we can pride ourselves. For the first time, we have said we want money for counties, 415 billion, Mr. Speaker. And we stand by that. It will not change anytime soon. But the other day when they were handling issue of fertilizer, they could not even rise up to the occasion and put the wrongs into right, Mr. Speaker. Even in the process that under one care, I don't want to revisit, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know this issue of county government, it does not concern the issue of under section on the certificate of joint resolution. I think this is something we canvass in the Supreme Court in our matter, where we said we must have a concurrence signed by the second house, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on clause number 10, whenever the Speaker of the second house disagrees with the question raised and contemplated, the Speaker backs to the Speaker of the originating house, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my worry is on clause 10.3. If the originating Speaker causes the bill to be modified to accommodate the observations of the Speaker of the second house. So now we have removed legislation from members of Parliament to the two speakers. Because now that is dangerous. This can create draconian laws. Because if the speakers will modify the bill and give the House, they are also human beings. They can mislead the country and create even draconian laws, Mr. Speaker. Because if we allow you, Mr. Speaker, we know you are a person of Solomonic organized, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we always have tremendous respect to the Speaker. But the law does not envisage a Speaker or speakers to be part of lawmaking process, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of clause number 12,